The land at Arrowhead Pass no longer smelled like pine or rain. It smelled like loss. Ash lay thick across the hills, dulling the colors of the world into gray and black. Trees stood stripped and skeletal, their branches twisted like burned fingers, reaching toward a sky that had already moved on. The wildfire had roared through the pass 3 weeks earlier, driven by cruel wind and dry summer heat, leaving nothing untouched in its path. Maverick Cole rode slowly along the edge of the old firebreak, his horse's hooves crunching softly against scorched earth. He had ridden this same stretch during the worst of the blaze, cutting lines through brush and timber with smoke in his lungs and flames snapping at his back. He remembered the chaos, the shouting, the crack of burning trees, the way the fire seemed alive, hungry. Now, the silence was worse. Maverick dismounted near a slope overlooking the valley and removed his hat. He scanned the land out of habit, checking wind direction, studying how the fire had jumped and where it had died. That's when he noticed movement, near the ruins of a small homestead cabin. A woman knelt beside the collapsed structure, her skirts smeared with soot, her hands digging through ash as if searching for something precious. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone afraid to disturb the dead. Maverick hesitated. Firebreak riders weren't always welcome after the fact. To some, they were reminders of what had been lost. Still, he tied his horse and approached on foot, boots sinking into soft ash. Stella Reed hadn't heard him coming. Her world had narrowed to broken stone, burned beams, and memories she wasn't ready to face. This cabin had been her parents' Preda place, built by hand. Board by board, long before the railroad ever reached Arrowhead Pass. She'd been born here. She'd planned to die here, too. The fire had other ideas. She brushed aside charred debris until her fingers closed around something solid. A cast iron hinge, warped but intact. Stella swallowed hard. It wasn't much, but it was proof that not everything had turned to dust. That belonged to the front door. The voice behind her was low, steady. Stella spun around, heart racing, then steadied, when she saw the man standing a few steps away. He looked like the land itself, worn, weathered, and unyielding. His coat was faded from sun and smoke, his boots scarred. A firebreak rider, she realized, one of the men who had cut through her land when the fire came. "I didn't mean to frighten you," Maverick said. "Name's Maverick Cole. I rode this line during the burn. I've been checking on the homesteads." Stella rose to her feet, clutching the hinge. Most folks stopped checking after the smoke cleared. Maverick met her gaze without flinching. "Fire may be gone, damage ain't." She studied him for a long moment, anger and exhaustion warring inside her. Finally, she nodded once. "Stella Reed. This was my home." "I'm sorry," Maverick said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Stella exhaled, some of the tightness in her chest easing despite herself. She gestured toward the ruins. "I'm staying. I don't know how yet, but I will." Maverick looked at the standing chimney, the scorched earth, the woman who refused to leave. He felt something settle in his chest, solid and certain. "Then, you won't have to do it alone," he said. "If you'll allow it." The wind shifted, lifting ash into the air like ghosts. And for the first time since the fire, Stella believed rebuilding might be possible. Morning came pale and cold over Arrowhead Pass, the sun struggling to warm land that had been scorched down to its bones. A thin fog clung to the valley, drifting low across blackened stumps and fallen branches. Stella woke beneath the canvas lean-to she'd rigged beside the standing chimney, her muscles aching from the day before. For the first time since the fire, she hadn't slept alone. Maverick was already awake. He knelt near the fire pit, coaxing embers back to life with practiced care, watching the wind more than the flame. Stella noticed that first, the way he read the air, like a living thing. Firebreak riders learned that habit early. Wind could save you, or kill you. "You always wake before sunrise?" she asked, pulling her shawl tighter. "Most days," Maverick replied. Fire doesn't wait for daylight. Neither does rebuilding. He handed her a tin cup of coffee. It was bitter and thin, but warm. Stella accepted it with a quiet nod. They didn't talk much at first. There was too much work, and words felt heavy in a place like this. The cabin's remains had to be cleared before anything new could rise. Burned beams were dragged away. Stones from the foundation were cleaned and stacked. Anything salvageable, hinges, nails, scraps of metal, was set aside carefully, as if it still held part of the past. As the sun climbed, the land revealed more scars. Fire had moved fast here, leaping from tree to tree, sparing some patches while devouring others. Maverick explained it as they worked, pointing out where the flames had crowned and where they'd dropped back to the ground. You see how it burned clean in this strip, he said, tracing a line with his boot. That's where the firebreak held. Rest of it, well, that's where it jumped us. Stella listened, not because she wanted a lesson, but because understanding helped ease the ache. Knowing how it happened made it feel less like punishment. By midday, sweat streaked soot down their faces. Stella's hands blistered, but she didn't stop. Every stone she lifted felt like reclaiming something the fire had tried to steal. Maverick noticed her grit, the way she squared her shoulders when the work grew harder. You don't have to push so hard, he said gently. Yes, I do, Stella replied. If I stop, I'll remember everything at once. Maverick nodded. He understood that kind of pain, the kind that waited patiently for stillness. They broke. Only when the sun stood high. Sitting on a fallen log, they shared hard bread and dried meat. Stella told him about her parents, about learning to split wood before she learned to write her name. Maverick spoke of writing lines from Arizona to Montana, of towns saved and others lost despite every effort. Fire doesn't care who you are, he said. Rich, poor, kind, cruel, it takes what it wants. Stella looked out over the valley, but it doesn't get the last word. By afternoon, the land looked different, not healed, but cleared. Space had opened where ruin once ruled. Maverick paced out the old foundation, marking where new logs could sit. He showed Stella how to test the ground, how to make sure the cabin would stand stronger than before. As shadows stretched long, Stella realized something quietly astonishing. She wasn't just surviving, she was building. And Maverick's steady, watchful Maverick had become part of that future, without ever asking permission. When night fell, they sat beside the fire, tired but determined. Sparks drifted upward into the dark, harmless now. Tomorrow, they would start the foundation, and with it, something new. The third day dawned warmer, the chill retreating, as if the land itself had decided to keep going. Sunlight filtered through the bare branches, illuminating patches of green, already daring to rise through the ash. Stella noticed them first, while hauling stones from the creek bed. Look, she said, kneeling, it's coming back. Maverick followed her gaze. Tiny shoots pushed upward, fragile but determined. He smiled faintly. Fire clears the way, sometimes makes room. They worked closer together now, setting the first foundation stones where the old cabin once stood. Maverick measured twice, his movements deliberate. Stella steadied each rock as he set it, their hands brushing more than once. Neither commented on it, but the silence felt charged, like dry air before rain. As the hours passed, they settled into an unspoken rhythm. Maverick lifted, Stella placed. He corrected angles. She adjusted without complaint. There was comfort in the teamwork, a sense of trust forming stone by stone. During a break, Stella studied him openly for the first time. His face bore the marks of his work-faint burn scars along his forearm, smoke lines permanently etched near his eyes. Yet there was gentleness there too, revealed in the way he handled tools, the way he spoke softly around the land. You ever think about staying in one place? She asked. Maverick paused, surprised by the question. Firebreak riders don't usually plan far ahead. That's not an answer. He smiled at that. No, I suppose I haven't. There's always another fire. Stella nodded. There's always another loss too. Doesn't mean you stop building." Her words lingered. By late afternoon, clouds gathered over the pass. Thunder rolled low and distant, stirring old fear in Stella's chest. Fire season had trained her to dread weather shifts. Maverick noticed her tension immediately. "It's rain," he said calmly, "not wind. We're safe." The first drops fell hard and fast, turning ash to mud. They scrambled to cover the foundation with canvas, laughter breaking through the urgency as they fought the sudden downpour. When the rain grew too heavy, they took shelter beneath the chimney, soaked and breathless. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of rain and shared heat. Stella met Maverick's eyes, something unspoken passing between them. Loss had brought them here. Work had bound them together, and now, in the quiet between storms, something else stirred. Maverick cleared his throat and looked away first. "Storm won't last long." "Nothing does," Stella replied softly. When the rain eased, the air felt clean-washed. The land looked different again, ash darkened, ready for new growth. They returned to work until dusk, finishing the foundation's final stones. That night, as firelight flickered against the chimney, Stella realized she hadn't thought about leaving once all day, and Maverick realized he hadn't thought about riding on. Something steady had begun beneath the ashes. By the fourth morning, Arrowhead Pass no longer felt like a graveyard. It still bore its scars' blackened trunks, scorched soil, but the air carried a quiet determination, as if the land itself had decided it wasn't finished yet. Stella felt it when she stepped outside the shelter and stretched sore arms beneath the rising sun. Today, they would raise the walls. Maverick had already hauled the first cut logs into place, rolling them with controlled strength. He'd ridden down to a lower valley the day before, where the fire hadn't burned as hot, selecting timber that was straight and strong. Stella watched as he marked each log carefully, showing her how to cut notches so they locked together tight. "A cabin's like a promise," Maverick said as he worked. "If you rush it, it won't hold when the weather turns." Stella smiled faintly. "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." They worked side by side, lifting, aligning, fitting each piece until the outline of walls began to rise from the foundation. With every log set, the space felt less like rubble and more like shelter. Stella could already imagine a table near the window, a quilt folded near the hearth. Memories surface, but they didn't crush her this time. During a pause, Stella handed Maverick water from the canteen. Their fingers lingered longer than necessary. Neither pulled away. "You're good at this," she said. He shrugged. "I've helped rebuild a few places after fires. Most folks don't come back." "I couldn't leave," Stella replied. "If I did, the fire would win." Maverick studied her face, seeing resolve forged by loss. "You're stronger than you think." The words warmed her more than the sun. As the walls rose higher, so did the risks. A log slipped once, scraping Maverick's arm. Stella rushed to his side, worry flashing across her face. "I'm fine," he assured her. Though the cut bled, she cleaned it, carefully, her touch gentle. "You spend your life protecting other people's land," she said quietly. "Who looks after you?" Maverick didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "I never stayed long enough to find out." That evening, a rider appeared on the ridge, a neighboring ranch, hand checking on survivors. He greeted Stella warmly, then turned to Maverick. "Firebreak crews, heading south next week," he said. "Plenty of work." The words landed heavy. After the rider left, silence stretched between them. Stella kept stacking tools, pretending not to care. Maverick watched her wrestling with something unseen. "You don't owe me anything," Stella said, without looking up. "You've done more than enough." "I know," Maverick replied. "That's not why it's hard." She finally met his eyes. "I've spent years moving from fire to fire," he continued. "Always helping rebuild, never staying to see what comes after. This," he gestured to the rising cabin. "This feels different." Stella's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "Then stay. At least until the walls are finished." Maverick nodded. "I will." That night, they sat close by the fire, the unfinished cabin standing behind them like a promise half-kept. Stella realized her guards had lowered, without her noticing. Maverick realized the same. The fire had taken much from Arrowhead Pass, but it had also brought two stubborn souls, together, ready at last, to build more than just walls. The cabin stood complete, just as the first hints of autumn crept into Arrowhead Pass. Morning light spilled across freshly set logs. Warming would still pale from the saw. Smoke curled gently from the rebuilt chimney, no longer a sign of destruction, but of life. Stella stood a few paces back, arms crossed tightly, not from cold, but from emotion she wasn't quite ready to release. She had imagined this moment so many times during the dark weeks after the fire, but she had never imagined it like this. Not rebuilt by her hands alone. Not with Maverick standing beside her. "It's solid," Maverick said, checking the roofline one last time, stronger than before. Stella swallowed and nodded. "My father would have liked that." They stepped inside together. The cabin smelled of fresh timber and smoke, not ash. Sunlight streamed through the new window, illuminating a simple table, a pair of chairs, and a bed frame waiting for a mattress. It wasn't grand, it wasn't perfect, but it was hers again, ours. A quiet voice inside her corrected. Stella turned to Maverick. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "You already did. You stayed." They stood there, the weight of weeks of shared labor settling into something deeper. Outside, the land was changing too. Grass had begun to creep through the blackened soil. Birds had returned. Life, stubborn and relentless, was reclaiming Arrowhead Pass. A rider appeared in the distance by mid-morning. Maverick recognized the signal immediately, a firebreak. Scout, he stepped outside to meet him, leaving Stella alone with her thoughts. She watched through the doorway as the two men spoke. When Maverick returned, his expression was unreadable. "They're moving fast," he said. "High winds south of here. They want every rider they can get." Stella's heart tightened. She nodded slowly. "I figured they would." Silence stretched between them, heavy and honest. This was the part Stella had feared, not the fire, not the rebuilding, but the choice that came after. "I won't pretend I didn't know this day would come," she said quietly. "The fire didn't take your life the way it took mine. Riding is who you are." Maverick looked past her, to the land, to the cabin, to the place that had changed him without asking permission. "It's who I was," he said. "Fire taught me how to survive. You taught me how to stay." Stella stared at him, breath-catching. "I've spent years stopping flames," Maverick continued, "but I've never stopped to build something meant to last. I don't want to ride on not yet. Maybe not ever." Tears blurred Stella's vision. "You don't have to decide everything today." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "I already have." Maverick reached for her hand, rough fingers fitting naturally against hers. "If you'll have me, I'd like to see what grows here. What grows with you." Stella didn't answer with words. She leaned into him, forehead resting against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong, alive, real. For the first time since the fire, she felt safe enough to let the past rest where it belonged. Outside, the wind moved gently through the pass, no longer a threat. The land remembered the fire, yes, but it also remembered the hands that rebuilt it. Arrowhead Pass would never be the same. It was better. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories. From ashes and loss, love had risen quiet, strong and unburned.